She thought she was walking into her future. Instead, Clara Whitmore walked straight into the worst night of her life. Behind a closed door at the governor's gala, her fiancé was confessing his love to her best friend. The betrayal didn't just break her heart, it shattered everything she thought she knew about her place in this world. But Clara wasn't the kind of woman who stayed broken. Before the night ended, she would make a choice that would turn humiliation into power and catch the attention of the most dangerous man in the territory. If you want to see how far this story reaches, drop a comment with your city below, hit that like button, and stay until the end. Trust me, you won't see this coming. The chandeliers were too bright. Clara noticed that first, how the light bounced off every crystal surface in the governor's ballroom, turning the whole space into something that felt more like an interrogation than a celebration. She stood near the entrance in a gown that cost more than most families made in a year. Emerald silk that her mother had insisted matched her eyes, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. "You look stunning," someone said in passing. One of the governor's aides, she thought, though they all blurred together after a while. She smiled, nodded, said thank you in the tone she'd been practicing since she was old enough to attend these things. But inside, something felt wrong. It wasn't the dress, though the corset was laced tight enough to make her ribs ache. It wasn't the crowd, though every important person in 3 territories seemed to have crammed themselves into this room tonight. It was something else, something she couldn't name yet, but could feel settling into her bones like winter cold. Across the room, Nathaniel Cross stood surrounded by railroad investors and territorial legislators, his posture perfect, his smile calibrated for maximum effect. He looked every inch the man she was supposed to marry in 6 weeks. Polished, powerful, ambitious in a way that people in this world respected. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd arrived. "Clara, darling." Her mother appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand, her own smile just as practiced. "You should circulate." The governor's wife was asking about the wedding plans. "Of course," Clara said automatically. Her mother squeezed her arm, affection or warning, it was hard to tell anymore, and drifted away toward a cluster of older women dripping in jewelry that could fund a small army. Clara stayed where she was. She'd known Nathaniel for 3 years, been engaged to him for 8 months. In all that time, he'd never once failed to acknowledge her arrival at an event like this. It was part of the performance, the careful choreography of frontier politics where marriage was just another form of alliance and love had nothing to do with it. So why tonight? "You look like you're planning an escape." The voice came from behind her, low, amused, unmistakably female. Clara turned to find Lila Mercer holding 2 glasses of champagne, one extended toward her. Lila looked radiant in silver, her dark hair swept up in a style that somehow looked effortless, even though Clara knew it had taken her maid 2 hours to achieve. "Just thinking," Clara said, accepting the glass. "Dangerous habit." Lila clinked her glass against Clara's. "Especially at these things. You start thinking too hard, you realize how ridiculous it all is." That pulled a genuine smile from Clara. Lila had that effect, cutting through the pretense with the kind of honesty that should have gotten her shunned from polite society, but somehow only made people like her more. They'd been friends since childhood, back when Clara's father was still alive, and the Whitmore name meant something beyond fading prestige and mounting debts. Lila was one of the few people in Clara's life who remembered her before she became a political asset, before marriage became strategy instead of choice. "Have you seen Nathaniel?" Clara asked, trying to sound casual. Lila's expression flickered, something Clara almost missed. "Earlier. Why?" "No reason. Just thought he'd—" She trailed off, suddenly feeling foolish. "He's probably networking," Lila said quickly. "You know how he gets at these things. The whole room is a chessboard to him." True enough, Nathaniel Cross didn't attend parties. He worked them. Every conversation was calculated, every handshake a move toward some larger goal. It was one of the things her mother admired about him, one of the things that made him such a suitable match. It was also one of the things that made Clara feel like she was drowning. "I should find him," Clara said. "Make an appearance together before people start talking." "Let them talk." Lila's voice had an edge now, sharp enough that Clara looked at her more closely. "Are you all right?" "Fine. Just tired of all this." Lila gestured vaguely at the room. "The performance, the games. Sometimes I think we'd all be better off if we just said what we actually meant." Before Clara could respond, Lila's name was called from across the room. Some cousin or another, Clara couldn't keep track, and her friend squeezed her hand once before disappearing into the crowd. The chandelier seemed even brighter now. Clara drained her champagne and set the glass on a passing servant's tray. Then she started moving through the ballroom, nodding to familiar faces, deflecting questions about the wedding with practiced ease, searching for the man who was supposed to be her future. She found him 20 minutes later. Or rather, she didn't find him at all. What she found was his absence, a gap in the crowd where he should have been, a knot of men still discussing railroad expansion, but without Nathaniel at the center. When she asked after him, they said he'd stepped out for air, or to take an important call, or the stories shifted depending on who was telling them. The unease that had been sitting in Clara's chest all night started spreading. She worked her way toward the edges of the ballroom, past the dance floor where couples moved in careful formations, past the tables laden with food no one was eating, past the alcoves where older women gossiped and men made deals that would reshape the territory. That's when she heard it. Not as discreet as he thinks. Two women stood partially hidden behind a marble column, their voices low, but not quite low enough. I give it another week before everyone knows. Poor Clara. Clara's feet stopped moving. Do you think she suspects? How could she not? The way he looks at her. Shh, not here. They moved away, leaving Clara frozen in place, her heart hammering against her ribs. The way he looks at her, not at Clara, at someone else. The ballroom suddenly felt too small, too hot, too loud. Clara pushed through a side door into a hallway lined with portraits of previous governors, all of them staring down with expressions that seemed to know exactly what she was about to discover. She told herself she was being paranoid. Nathaniel was ambitious, calculating, sometimes cold, but unfaithful? That would be stupid, and Nathaniel Cross was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. Except he hadn't looked at her all night. Except Lila had been strange when she'd asked about him. Except those women had said poor Clara in the exact tone people used when they knew something you didn't. Clara found herself walking faster, past closed doors and empty sitting rooms, following some instinct she didn't fully understand. The sounds of the party faded behind her until all she could hear was the rustle of her skirts and the blood rushing in her ears. She turned a corner into the private wing of the governor's mansion, the section where guests weren't supposed to wander, and saw light spilling from beneath a door at the end of the hall. Her hand was on the doorknob before she could talk herself out of it. She turned it slowly, easing the door open just enough to see inside. The study was all dark wood and leather, built for closed-door negotiations and private deals. A fire burned in the hearth, casting shadows that made the whole room feel like a confessional. Two figures stood near the fireplace. Clara's breath stopped. Nathaniel had his back to her, but she'd know his posture anywhere. The set of his shoulders, the way he held himself like he owned whatever space he occupied. He was talking, his voice lower than she'd ever heard it, intimate in a way that made something crack open in her chest. Can't keep doing this. Someone's going to notice. The woman in front of him lifted her head. Silver dress, dark hair, features Clara would know in her sleep. Lila. Let them notice, Lila said, and her voice broke on the words. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of watching you with her when what? Nathaniel cut in. When you knew from the beginning what this was, what she was. Clara's hand tightened on the doorknob. A means to an end, Nathaniel continued, each word sharp enough to draw blood. The Whitmore name still carries weight in certain circles. Her mother's connections, her father's old alliances, they're useful. Clara herself? He laughed, and it was the cruelest sound Clara had ever heard. She's pleasant enough, biddable, exactly what a man needs in a wife when he's building the kind of power I'm after. And what am I? Lila's voice shook. What does that make me? Nathaniel stepped closer to her, close enough that Clara could see him lift his hand to Lila's face. You're what I actually want, he said simply. But wanting and having are different things, Lila. You know that. In this world, you take what advances you and hide what you actually feel. That's how you survive. I don't want to just survive anymore. Then you're a fool. The words hung in the air between them. Clara felt something inside her go very still and very cold. She'd spent 8 months convincing herself that what she had with Nathaniel was enough. That respect could replace passion, that partnership could replace love, that she could build a life on the foundation of mutual advantage and careful diplomacy. She'd told herself that the distance between them didn't matter because this was how marriages worked in their world. Pragmatic, strategic, clear-eyed about what each person brought to the table. But this was something else entirely. "What are you going to do?" Lila whispered. Nathaniel's hand was still on her face. "Exactly what I planned. Marry Clara in 6 weeks, consolidate the alliances her family brings, use that foundation to build something bigger, and in the meantime, we keep lying. We keep being smart," Nathaniel corrected. "We keep understanding that power requires sacrifice, that sometimes you have to choose between what you want and what you need. And if I can't do that anymore?" Silence. Then Nathaniel's voice, colder than before. "Then you were never as strong as I thought you were." Clara pushed the door open. The hinges made no sound, but both of them turned as if she'd screamed. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Lila gasped. Actually gasped, like a character in one of the melodramas Clara's mother pretended to be too sophisticated to enjoy, and stepped back from Nathaniel so quickly she nearly stumbled. "Clara, don't." Clara was impressed by how steady her voice sounded, how calm, like her entire world wasn't actively disintegrating. "Please don't." Nathaniel's face did something complicated, surprise, calculation, something that might have been guilt if she didn't know him better. Then it smoothed into the expression he wore when negotiating contracts, all careful neutrality and strategic consideration. "How long have you been standing there, Wes?" he asked. "Long enough." He nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something he'd suspected. "Then we should talk." "Should we?" Clara stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them in front of her where neither of them could see. "I'm trying to imagine what you could possibly say right now that would make any difference." "Clara, please." Lila moved toward her, eyes bright with tears that Clara might have believed were genuine if she hadn't just heard every word of the last 5 minutes. "It's not... You didn't mean for me to find out," Clara finished. "I understand that part perfectly." "It's not what you think," Lila tried again. "Really?" Clara looked at her. This woman she'd trusted with every secret, every fear, every small hope she'd been afraid to say out loud. "Then please, explain what it is. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." Nathaniel moved then, stepping between them with the kind of smooth confidence that Clara had once found reassuring and now recognized as simply arrogance. "You're upset," he said, "which is understandable. But if you'll let me explain..." "You just did explain." Clara met his eyes. "Very thoroughly. I'm a means to an end, biddable, useful for my connections and my family's fading prestige. Was I supposed to pretend I didn't hear that part?" Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe, that she was refusing to make this easy. "I'm a practical man, Clara. You've always known that. This marriage was never about romance or passion. It was about building something larger than either of us. Your mother understood that. I thought you did too." "I did," Clara said quietly. "I understood exactly what this was. What I didn't understand was that you were building it with someone else in the shadows." "That's not fair," Lila said, her voice breaking. Clara turned to her slowly. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I never meant to hurt you." "But you did it anyway." The words came out harder than Clara intended. "How long?" Lila's face crumpled. "Clara!" "How long?" 6 months, Nathaniel said, because apparently he was done pretending. "Give or take. Does it matter?" 6 months. Clara did the math automatically. 6 months ago, she'd introduced them at her mother's garden party. Lila had just returned from visiting cousins in the capital. Nathaniel had been charming, attentive, everything a good fiancé should be. He'd asked Lila about her travels, laughed at her stories, suggested they all have dinner together the following week. Clara had been so pleased that the 2 most important people in her life were getting along. "You must think I'm the biggest fool alive," she said. "No." Nathaniel had the audacity to sound sincere. "I think you're exactly what I've always thought you were. Intelligent, composed, from a good family, perfect for what I need. Just not what you want." He didn't deny it. The fire crackled in the silence. Outside, the party continued. Music and laughter and people celebrating things that suddenly seemed completely meaningless. "So what happens now?" Clara asked. "You've been caught. I know everything. What's your next move?" Nathaniel studied her, and she could practically see him calculating angles, weighing options, trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor. "We can work through this," he said finally. "We're both adults. Both understand how the world works. This doesn't have to change anything." Clara laughed, actually laughed, and watched him flinch. "You think I'm going to marry you anyway, after this?" "I think you're smart enough to know what happens if you don't." His voice hardened. "Your mother has been living on credit and old favors for 3 years. Your family name is all you have left, and even that's fading fast. You need this marriage as much as I do, maybe more." There it was. The calculation she'd been waiting for. The knife dressed up as logic. "So we go through with the wedding," Nathaniel continued. "We build the life we planned. What I do in private doesn't affect that." "And what I do?" Clara heard herself ask. "Do I get the same freedom?" His expression closed. "That's different." "Of course it is." "Clara," Lila started, but Clara held up a hand. "No, I don't want to hear anything else from you. Not tonight. Maybe not ever." "I never meant—" "You meant enough," Clara said flatly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You both did. So please don't insult me by pretending otherwise." She turned toward the door, her skirt swishing against the carpet, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Where are you going?" Nathaniel demanded. Clara looked back at him over her shoulder. "Anywhere but here. If you walk out that door, if you make a scene, if you do anything that damages my reputation or my prospects—" "You'll what?" Clara's voice was soft, dangerous in a way she'd never allowed it to be before. "Ruin me? I think you've already done that." She opened the door. "Clara, wait." But she was already moving, back down the hallway, past the portraits with their judging eyes, toward the sound of music and voices and 300 people who expected her to smile and nod and play her part. She made it to the ballroom entrance before her legs gave out. Not completely. She wasn't dramatic enough for that, and years of training had taught her how to stay upright even when everything inside her was collapsing. But she had to stop, had to press one hand against the doorframe and focus on breathing. In, out, like it was something she had to remember how to do. Through the doorway, she could see couples dancing, women laughing, men making deals. The governor was holding court near the orchestra. Her mother was deep in conversation with a railroad magnate's wife. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. But Clara wasn't the same. She'd walked into this party engaged, certain of her future, convinced she understood the terms of her life. Now she was, what? Betrayed? Humiliated? Disposable? A means to an end. The worst part was that Nathaniel was right. Her mother had been counting on this marriage to restore their family's position. Clara's younger sister needed a proper debut, a good match of her own. They needed the money, the connections, the stability that came from aligning themselves with someone like Nathaniel Cross. If Clara walked away now, if she broke the engagement, if she let pride override practicality, they'd all suffer for it. That's what Nathaniel was counting on. That's why he'd been so calm when she'd discovered them. He knew she was trapped. Clara felt something hot and bitter rise in her throat. Then a voice behind her said, "You should probably breathe." She spun around. The man standing 3 feet away was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He wore black from head to toe, expensive but understated, nothing like the peacock displays most men preferred at these events. His hair was dark, his jaw sharp, his expression unreadable. She knew him immediately. Everyone did. Caleb Thornridge, Duke of the Northern Territories, owner of more land than most people could cross in a week, known for being ruthless in business, dangerous in conflict, and utterly uninterested in the social games that consumed everyone else. He was also, according to every rumor Clara had ever heard, someone you didn't want to cross. "I'm breathing fine," she managed. "You look like you're about to pass out." He said it without sympathy, just stating facts. "And there are 300 people in that room who would love to see Clara Whitmore make a scene. So if you're planning to fall over, you might want to find somewhere more private." "I'm not going to—" She stopped, took a breath, started again. "I'm fine." "Sure you are." Something about his tone, dry, skeptical, completely unimpressed, made the tightness in her chest ease slightly. "What do you want?" she asked. Nothing. I was leaving when I saw you having a crisis in the doorway. Thought I'd mention the breathing thing before you actually passed out and made tomorrow's gossip columns. He moved to walk past her. Clara's mouth opened before her brain caught up. Do you know? He stopped, turned back, raised one eyebrow in question. About... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say it out loud where anyone might hear. But Caleb's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough, and she knew he understood. About your fiancé and your friend? He said it quietly, but without any attempt to soften it. Half the party knows. The other half will know by morning. The blood drained from Clara's face. Oh, she heard herself say. That's wonderful. She was going to be sick. Right here, right now, in front of Caleb Thornridge and anyone else who happened to walk by. She was going to... Walk, Caleb said. What? He gestured down the hallway. You need air. You need space. The terrace is this way, and it's empty because it's cold enough out there that the delicate flowers avoid it. So walk. It wasn't a suggestion. Clara found herself moving, following him past closed doors and empty rooms, her mind still spinning, her breath still too shallow. They emerged onto a stone terrace that overlooked the mansion's gardens. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp, and exactly what she needed. Clara gripped the stone railing and gulped it down, feeling her vision clear, her lungs expand. Behind her, Caleb said nothing. She should thank him, should say something polite and appropriate, and then return to the party before anyone noticed she'd disappeared. Instead, she heard herself ask, How long have you known? That Cross was an unfaithful idiot? About 2 months. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the gardens rather than at her. I don't pay much attention to gossip, but some things are too obvious to ignore. And you didn't think to mention it? To you? He glanced at her finally. We've never spoken before tonight, and in my experience, people don't appreciate being told things they're not ready to know. I was ready, Clara said. Were you? She wanted to argue, but the truth was she'd suspected something was wrong for weeks, maybe longer. She just hadn't wanted to look at it too closely, hadn't wanted to risk what she'd discover. This is going to destroy me, she said quietly. Probably, Caleb agreed. Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're not very comforting. You want comfort? Find a church. You want honesty? I'm right here. She looked at him properly for the first time. In the moonlight, his features were all hard angles and shadows, his expression still unreadable. He looked like someone carved from the same stone as the terrace, unmovable and utterly unconcerned with what anyone thought of him. Why are you helping me? She asked. Am I helping you? You got me out of there before I collapsed in public. That's something. He shrugged. I don't like watching people drown when they could learn to swim instead. Swimming implies there's somewhere to go. I'm trapped. Are you? My family needs this marriage. My mother's already spent money she doesn't have planning the wedding. If I break the engagement, you'll face consequences, Caleb finished. Yes, but you'll face worse ones if you marry a man who's already made it clear exactly how little he values you. Clara's fingers tightened on the railing. You heard us. In the study. I was walking past. The door was open. He said it without apology. Cross was doing that thing men like him do, explaining why his betrayal was actually reasonable if you looked at it from the right angle. He wasn't wrong, Clara said softly. About the marriage being strategic, about me bringing connections he needs, about you being a means to an end, Caleb's voice hardened. He was wrong about that. Clara turned to look at him, surprised. He met her gaze dead on. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I'm not sure Someone smart enough to figure out she was being betrayed before she had proof. Someone strong enough to confront it instead of hiding. Someone who's standing here right now choosing to face reality instead of running back to the party and pretending everything's fine. He paused. That's not someone who's just a means to an end. That's someone who could be dangerous if she decided to be. The words hit Clara like a physical force. I don't feel very dangerous right now, she admitted. No. Right now you feel humiliated and powerless, and like your entire future just crumbled. He said it matter-of-factly. Tomorrow you'll feel angry. The day after that, you'll start planning. And eventually, if you're half as smart as I think you are, you'll realize that Nathaniel Cross just made the biggest mistake of his life. How? Clara demanded. He's right about everything. I need this marriage. My family needs it. Walking away means you stop letting other people define your value. Caleb's voice was quiet but absolute. It means you take control of your own story instead of playing a part in someone else's. That's easy for you to say. She gestured vaguely at him. You, Duke of wherever, rich enough that you could lose half your fortune and still be wealthier than everyone in that ballroom combined. You don't have to calculate every decision based on who it might offend or what connections you might lose. True, he agreed. But I also didn't get here by accident. You think I inherited all this? Half of it, maybe. The rest I built by refusing to be what people expected, by being willing to make enemies if that's what it took to move forward. I can't afford enemies. You already have them. He nodded toward the ballroom. Cross will make sure of that. The moment you walked away from that study, you became a problem he needs to solve. And men like him solve problems by destroying them. Clara's blood went cold. He wouldn't. He will. He'll spin this whole thing to make himself the victim and you the hysterical woman who couldn't handle a little reality. By tomorrow, half the territory will believe you were the one at fault. That you drove him to Lila. That you were frigid or demanding or whatever story he decides sounds best. That's how it works, Caleb said flatly. You know it is. He was right. She did know. She'd seen it happen to other women. The whispers, the side glances, the way a reputation could be shredded in days by the right rumors spread through the right channels. So what am I supposed to do? Clara heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. Just accept it? Let him ruin me while he marries someone else and pretends none of this happened? No. Caleb turned to face her fully. You do something unexpected. Like what? Like coming back to that party with me. Clara blinked. What? Cross thinks he's won. Thinks he's got you trapped. Everyone in that room thinks the same thing, that you'll either fall in line or fall apart. Prove them wrong. How? Caleb's smile was sharp enough to cut. Let me worry about that. You just have to be willing to make a scene. This is insane, Clara whispered. They stood at the terrace doors, the party spread out before them like a stage set. Through the glass, Clara could see Nathaniel deep in conversation with a railroad magnate, his expression serious, his posture radiating confidence. He thought he'd already won. It's a gamble, Caleb corrected. But you're about to lose everything anyway. Might as well go down fighting. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything she'd been taught said this was wrong, that making a scene, drawing attention, confronting power directly instead of with careful diplomacy was the fastest way to destroy yourself. But everything she'd been taught had also led her here, to this moment, humiliated and powerless, and exactly where men like Nathaniel wanted women like her. What exactly are you planning to do? She asked. Nothing you don't agree to. Caleb's voice was steady. But when we walk through those doors, I need you to trust me, just for the next 10 minutes. Can you do that? Clara looked at him, the stranger who had no reason to help her, who was offering something she didn't fully understand, who looked at her like she was more than just a chess piece to be moved around someone else's board. Then she looked back at the ballroom, at Nathaniel still charming his way through conversations, at Lila standing near the orchestra pretending she wasn't watching the door, at 300 people who expected Clara to crumble. Yes, she heard herself say, I can do that. Caleb's smile was genuinely pleased now. Then let's give them something to talk about. He offered his arm. Clara took it, and together they walked back into the light. The ballroom didn't go silent when they entered. That only happened in bad novels. But Clara felt the shift anyway, the way conversations stuttered and eyes tracked their movement across the floor. Caleb Thornridge didn't attend many social functions, and when he did, he certainly didn't arrive with women on his arm, especially not women who were supposed to be engaged to someone else. People are staring, Clara murmured. Good, Caleb said. That's the point. He guided her through the crowd with the kind of confidence that came from never having to question whether he belonged somewhere. People moved out of their way without thinking about it, creating a path that led straight toward the center of the room, straight toward Nathaniel. Clara's stomach twisted. What are you? Trust me, Caleb reminded her quietly. Remember? She didn't have time to respond before Nathaniel turned and saw them. His expression went through several rapid changes. Confusion, recognition, something that might have been alarm, before settling into careful neutrality. "Thornridge," he said, extending a hand. "Didn't realize you were attending tonight." "Last-minute decision." Caleb shook his hand briefly, then released it. "I hope you don't mind that I borrowed your fiancée for a moment. She looked like she needed some air." The men around Nathaniel exchanged glances. One of them, a territorial judge whose name Clara couldn't remember, cleared his throat. "That was kind of you," Nathaniel said. His eyes flicked to Clara, searching. "Darling, are you feeling all right?" The endearment landed like a slap. Darling. He'd called her that in front of Lila less than an hour ago while explaining exactly how useful she was to his ambitions. "I'm fine," Clara said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Just needed a moment." "Well, I'm glad Thornridge was there to help." Nathaniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I'm sure people will talk. You know how these things are." There it was, the subtle threat wrapped in concern, the reminder that appearances mattered, that being seen with another man could damage her reputation even more than it already was. Clara felt Caleb's hand tighten slightly on her arm. "Let them talk," Caleb said easily. "I found that people who spend too much time worrying about gossip usually have something to hide." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Nathaniel's smile froze. "I'm not sure I follow." "No?" Caleb's tone was pleasant, conversational. "Strange. I thought you were known for being perceptive." The judge shifted uncomfortably. The railroad magnate suddenly became very interested in his drink. The whole group radiated tension now, though Clara suspected only she and Nathaniel fully understood why. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Nathaniel said carefully. "I don't think there's anything to discuss." Caleb glanced at Clara. "Unless Miss Whitmore disagrees." Every eye in their immediate vicinity was on her now. Claire could feel the weight of it, could feel the expectation that she'd smooth this over, laugh it off, play the role of the accommodating fiancé who knew when to be quiet. She thought about Nathaniel's voice in the study. A means to an end. Biddable. "Actually," Clara heard herself say, "there is something we should discuss, but you're right, it should be private." Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Clara." "Excuse us, gentlemen." She looked at Caleb. "Thank you for your assistance, Duke Thornridge. I can handle it from here." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He inclined his head slightly and released her arm. "Of course. Enjoy your evening." He walked away without looking back, leaving Clara alone with Nathaniel and an audience of men who were definitely going to repeat every word of this conversation. "If you'll excuse us," Nathaniel said to the group, his charm back in place. "I need to speak with my fiancé." He didn't wait for her agreement, just took her elbow and steered her toward one of the side alcoves. His grip was just tight enough to hurt. "What the hell was that?" he demanded once they were out of immediate earshot. "What was what?" "Thornridge, walking in here with him like—" He stopped himself, visibly gathering control. "Do you have any idea what people are going to say? About me being escorted by a gentleman when I was feeling unwell?" Clara kept her voice level. "I imagine they'll say he was being polite." "Don't play naive. It doesn't suit you." Nathaniel's eyes were hard now, all pretense of affection gone. "We had an understanding, Clara. You don't make waves. You don't create problems. You certainly don't make a spectacle of yourself with men like Caleb Thornridge." "Men like— what does that mean?" "It means he's dangerous. It means getting involved with him in any capacity is a mistake you'll regret." He lowered his voice. "Whatever you think you're doing, whatever point you think you're making, stop, now, before you make this worse." Clara stared at him. At this man she'd agreed to marry, who'd spent 6 months sleeping with her best friend while planning their wedding. Who thought the problem here was that she'd accepted help from someone else, not that he'd betrayed her in the first place. "Worse for who?" she asked quietly. "For both of us, for—" He paused as someone walked past, then continued more carefully. "What happened earlier was unfortunate. I understand you're upset, but we can work through this if you don't do anything rash." "Rash," Claire repeated. "Like confronting you about sleeping with Lila?" "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Why? Worried someone might hear the truth?" "I'm worried you're about to destroy your future because you can't see past your hurt feelings." He stepped closer, his expression intense. "Think, Clara. Think about what happens if you break this engagement. Your family's debts don't disappear. Your mother's expectations don't change. Your sister still needs a proper introduction to society, and who's going to provide that if the Whitmore name is attached to scandal? Each word hit exactly where he intended. Clara felt them land like punches, precise, calculated, designed to remind her of everything she stood to lose. So I should just accept it, she said. Accept that you'll marry me while keeping Lila on the side. Accept being humiliated as long as it's done quietly. I'm asking you to be practical. Nathaniel's voice softened, became almost gentle. This is how the world works, Clara. You know that. Marriage is about alliance, not romance. What I feel for Lila, what she feels for me, it doesn't change what you and I can build together. And if I can't live with that, his expression hardened, then you're not as intelligent as I thought you were. Before Clara could respond, a familiar voice cut through the conversation. There you are. They both turned to find Lila standing a few feet away, her face pale, her hands twisting together in front of her. She looked like she'd been crying, though she'd clearly tried to fix her makeup. Lila, Nathaniel said warningly, this isn't the time. I know, but She looked at Clara, and whatever she saw there made her voice crack. I need to talk to you, please, just for a minute. We're in the middle of something, Nathaniel said. I wasn't asking you. Lila's voice gained a little strength. Clara, please, let me explain. Clara should have walked away. Should have refused to give Lila the satisfaction of an explanation, the opportunity to make excuses that wouldn't change anything. But there was something in her friend's expression, former friend's expression, that made her hesitate. Fine, she said. 1 minute. Nathaniel opened his mouth to protest, but Clara was already moving toward the terrace doors. She needed air again, needed space away from all these watching eyes and careful smiles. Lila followed her outside. The cold hit Clara's bare arms immediately, raising goosebumps, but she ignored it. She walked to the far end of the terrace, putting as much distance as possible between them and the ballroom windows. Well, she said without turning around. Explain. I don't know where to start. How about with the truth? Clara turned to face her. When did it start? And don't lie to me, I'll know. Lila wrapped her arms around herself. The garden party, your mother's garden party 6 months ago, when I introduced you. Yes? Clara laughed bitterly. Of course, I handed you to him gift-wrapped. It wasn't like that. We didn't plan it. Lila's words came faster now, tumbling over each other. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel, seen, special, like I was more than just another society girl looking for a good match, while he was engaged to me. I know how that sounds. But Clara, you have to understand, you never seemed that interested in him anyway. You talked about the marriage like it was a business arrangement. You thought what? That it didn't count? Clara's voice rose despite herself. That because I wasn't performing grand romantic gestures, my engagement was somehow less real? That betraying me was acceptable because I wasn't swooning over him? No. Yes. I don't know. Lila's face crumpled. I just know that when I was with him, everything else disappeared. All the pressure, all the expectations, all the careful games we have to play, none of it mattered. It was just us. How lovely for you both. Clara, do you love him? The question came out harder than Clara intended. Is that what this is? True love that justifies lying to me for 6 months? Lila's silence was answer enough. You do, Clara said flatly. You actually love him. I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But yes. Lila's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Yes, I love him. Something in Clara's chest twisted, because that made it worse somehow, made the betrayal sharper, more complete. If it had just been physical attraction, just convenience or boredom or opportunity, that would have been easier to understand. But love. Love meant Lila had chosen Nathaniel over their friendship knowingly, deliberately, despite understanding exactly what it would do to Clara. And he loves you, Clara said. He says he does, but... Lila stopped. But he's still planning to marry me. He says it's complicated, that the marriage is about more than just feelings, that he needs my family's connections. Yes, I heard that part. Clara's voice was ice now. He was very clear about my value, or lack thereof. He didn't mean it like that. Lila, I was there. I heard every word. He meant exactly what he said. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the distant music from the ballroom and the wind moving through the gardens below. I'm sorry, Lila said finally. I know that's not enough. I know I've ruined everything. But I am sorry, Clara. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did it anyway. Clara kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. You chose him over me. Every day for 6 months, you woke up and chose to keep lying to me. To smile at me and listen to me talk about wedding plans and pretend you weren't sleeping with my fiancé. I know. Do you? Clara stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, you still don't seem to understand what you've done. You're standing here talking about love like that makes it acceptable, like your feelings justify destroying mine. That's not... I never thought... No, you didn't think. Or you did, and you decided your happiness was more important than my dignity. Clara's control was slipping now, emotion bleeding through despite her best efforts. You were my best friend, Lila, the person I trusted most in the world, and you chose him. Lila's face was wet with tears now. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. Clara's voice broke on the words. I want you to go back inside. I want you to stay away from me. And I want you to remember, every time you look at Nathaniel, what it cost to have him. Clara, please, we're done. Do you understand? We're done. Clara turned and walked back toward the ballroom, her vision blurring, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. Behind her, she heard Lila sob, a raw, broken sound, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. If she stopped, if she let herself feel everything that was building up inside her, she'd shatter. And she'd already given them enough. She made it 3 steps into the ballroom before she realized she had no idea where she was going. The party continued around her, music, laughter, the clink of crystal, and Clara stood frozen in the middle of it all, feeling like she was drowning in air. Miss Whitmore. She turned to find Caleb standing near one of the marble columns, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her with those unreadable eyes. You look like you need this more than I do, he said, offering her the glass. Clara took it without thinking and downed half the contents in one burning swallow. It hit her stomach like fire, making her cough, but it also cleared her head slightly. Better? Caleb asked. Not remotely. She handed the glass back. But thank you. What did she say? Clara laughed, sharp and humorless. That she loves him, that she didn't mean to hurt me. The usual excuses people make when they've done something unforgivable and want absolution anyway. Did you give it to her? No. Good. He finished the whiskey. Forgiveness is overrated when someone hasn't earned it. Is that advice or observation? Both. Clara looked at him properly. In the ballroom light, Caleb Thornridge was even more imposing than he'd been on the terrace, all sharp edges and controlled power, the kind of man who made other men nervous without saying a word. Why are you helping me? She asked again. And don't say it's because you don't like watching people drown. There's more to it than that. His mouth curved slightly. You're right, there is. So I don't like Nathaniel Cross. Never have. He's the kind of man who thinks being clever makes him powerful, who mistakes manipulation for strategy. Caleb's voice was matter of fact. Watching him lose something he thought he had locked down, that has a certain appeal. So I'm what? A weapon you're using against him? Only if you choose to be. He met her eyes. I'm offering an opportunity, Clara. What you do with it is your decision. Before she could respond, the orchestra shifted into a waltz. Around them, couples began moving toward the dance floor. Caleb set his empty glass on a passing servant's tray and extended his hand. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. Clara stared at his hand, her mind racing. If she danced with him, really danced, not just a polite turn around the floor, it would be a statement, a declaration. Everyone would see it, everyone would talk about it, and there would be no going back. But going back to what? To an engagement that was built on lies? To a friendship that was already destroyed? To a future where she smiled and nodded and pretended she didn't know her fiancé was in love with someone else? She thought about Nathaniel's face in the study, Lila's tears on the terrace, the years of careful control and calculated politeness that had led her exactly nowhere except to this moment, humiliated and powerless. Clara placed her hand in Caleb's. "One dance," she said. "That's all I'm asking." He led her onto the floor, and the crowd parted around them like water. Clara felt every eye tracking their movement, felt the weight of speculation and scandal building with each step. Then Caleb's hand settled at her waist, and the music began, and everything else faded. He was an excellent dancer, better than Nathaniel, better than any of the men Clara had danced with at events like this. He moved with absolute confidence, guiding her through the steps like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "You're good at this," Clara said. "I'm good at most things." There was no arrogance in his voice, just statement of fact. "Comes with practice and not caring what people think. Must be nice?" "It has its advantages," he spun her smoothly. "Though I imagine it's harder when you've been raised to care." "Is that what you think I was raised to do? Care about appearances? Weren't you?" Clara wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd been trained from childhood to smile at the right moments, to say the right things, to make herself useful and pleasant and exactly what was expected. And where had it gotten her? "What happened on the terrace?" Caleb asked. "With your friend?" "Former friend." And she apologized, sort of. Mostly she explained how she fell in love with Nathaniel and couldn't help herself. "Romantic. Isn't it?" Clara's voice hardened. "Star-crossed lovers, united by true feeling, too consumed by passion to care who they hurt. You don't believe in that?" "I believe people make choices, and they chose to lie to me." "Fair enough." He guided her through another turn. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do." Clara looked up at him sharply. "Excuse me?" "You know exactly what you're going to do," Caleb said. "You knew the moment you put your hand in mine. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." "And what do you think I'm going to do?" "You're going to break the engagement." He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "You're going to walk away from Nathaniel Cross and let him scramble to save face while you rebuild on your own terms." "That's a lovely fantasy," Clara said, "but in the real world I have responsibilities, family obligations. I can't just—" "You can do whatever you decide to do," Caleb interrupted. "The question is whether you're brave enough." The music swelled around them. Clara felt dizzy, overwhelmed, like the whole room was spinning too fast. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "I know you're stronger than you think. I know you're tired of pretending. And I know you're about 30 seconds away from making a decision that's going to change everything." He was right. Clara could feel it building inside her, the anger, the humiliation, the years of swallowing her pride and accepting less than she deserved. All of it coiling tight in her chest, ready to explode. The music ended. Caleb released her, stepped back, and bowed formally. And Clara made her choice. She turned to face the crowd, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "I have an announcement to make." The room went dead silent. Clara saw her mother's face go white, saw Nathaniel push through the crowd, his expression alarmed, saw Lila standing frozen near the orchestra, one hand pressed to her mouth. "My engagement to Nathaniel Cross," Clara said clearly, "is over, effective immediately." The silence shattered into chaos. Her mother gasped. Several women began whispering frantically. The men looked between Clara and Nathaniel like they were watching a duel and couldn't decide who to bet on. Nathaniel reached her side, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Clara, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," she said. "Something you should try sometime. We need to talk about this privately." "Why?" "So you can explain again how I'm making a mistake? How I should be practical?" She raised her voice slightly, making sure everyone could hear. "I'm done being practical. I'm done pretending. And I'm done with you." She pulled the engagement ring off her finger, a family heirloom he'd given her with appropriate ceremony, and held it out. "Take it. Give it to Lila. I'm sure she'll appreciate it more than I ever did." Nathaniel didn't move. His face had gone dangerously blank, all emotion locked down behind iron control. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "When the reality hits, when your family loses everything because of your pride, you'll regret it." "Maybe," Clara said, "but at least I'll regret my own choices instead of living with yours." She placed the ring in his hand and stepped back. The crowd was a wall of staring faces now, hungry for scandal, thrilled by the spectacle. Clara felt exposed, vulnerable, like she'd just stripped naked in front of them all. But she also felt free. Caleb appeared at her side again, his presence solid and steadying. "Ready to leave?" he asked. Clara looked at him, this dangerous man who'd offered her a lifeline without asking for anything in return, and nodded. "Yes, please." He offered his arm again, and this time when she took it, it felt like accepting an alliance, like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. They walked toward the exit together while 300 people watched and whispered and began rewriting Clara Whitmore's story into something scandalous and shocking and utterly ruined. Her mother intercepted them at the door. "Clara Rosemary Whitmore," she hissed, her face pale with fury and panic. "What have you done?" "What I should have done weeks ago," Clara said. "Do you have any idea the consequences? We'll be destroyed? Then we'll rebuild." Clara was surprised by how calm she sounded. "But I won't do it chained to a man who thinks I'm nothing more than a useful connection." "You selfish, foolish girl." Her mother's voice shook. "You've ruined us. You've ruined everything." The words should have hurt, would have hurt, even an hour ago. But Clara just looked at her mother, at this woman who'd taught her to smile through pain, to accept less than she deserved, to measure her value by who she could attract and what alliances she could build, and felt something close to pity. "I'm sorry you see it that way," she said quietly. "But I'm not sorry for leaving." She walked past her mother, through the grand entrance, down the marble steps to where carriages waited in the torchlit drive. Caleb stayed beside her the entire time, silent and steady, until they reached his carriage, black and expensive and marked with the Thornridge crest. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. Clara realized she had no idea. Not home, her mother would follow, would argue, would try to convince her to undo what she'd just done. Not to friends. What friends did she have left? "I don't know," she admitted. "Then come with me." He opened the carriage door. "I have a house in town, guest rooms. No expectations, no demands, just space to breathe and figure out what comes next." Clara looked back at the governor's mansion, all lit up and glittering, full of people who were probably still talking about her. Then she looked at Caleb Thornridge, who'd helped her for reasons she still didn't fully understand, who'd given her the push she'd needed to choose herself over security. "All right," she said, and climbed into the carriage. As they pulled away, Clara caught a glimpse of Nathaniel standing in the mansion doorway, watching her leave with an expression she couldn't read from this distance. She didn't look back again. The carriage ride passed in silence. Clara sat across from Caleb, watching the torchlit streets of the territorial capital roll past the window. Her hands were shaking, had been shaking since they'd left the mansion, but she kept them folded in her lap where he couldn't see. What had she done? The question circled through her mind like a vulture, picking at the edges of her decision. She'd just destroyed her engagement in front of 300 witnesses, had humiliated Nathaniel Cross publicly, had defied her mother, had thrown away the one alliance that was supposed to save her family from financial ruin. And for what? Pride. Dignity. The desperate need to prove she was more than a bargaining chip. "You're thinking too much," Caleb said without looking at her. "How would you know?" "Because you haven't said a word in 15 minutes, and your breathing keeps changing like you're trying to talk yourself into or out of something." Clara forced her hands to still. "I'm fine." "You're terrified." He finally looked at her. "Which is reasonable given what you just did. But you're also still here, which means some part of you knows you made the right choice." "The right choice?" Clara repeated. "I just ruined my family. That's the right choice?" "Your family was already ruined. You just refused to tie yourself to the sinking ship." "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to face my mother tomorrow, or the creditors, or the whispers that will follow me everywhere I go for the next decade." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You want honesty?" "I'm not sure anymore. The next few weeks are going to be hell. Cross will make sure of it. He's not the type to accept humiliation quietly. Your mother will blame you for everything that happens. Society will eat you alive." He paused. "But you'll survive it. And when you come out the other side, you'll be someone who chose her own path instead of the one that was safest. And if I don't survive it, then you were never as strong as I thought you were." He sat back. "But I don't think that's the case." The carriage turned onto a tree-lined street where the houses grew larger, more imposing. Gas lamps cast pools of yellow light across manicured lawns and iron gates. "This is where you live?" Clara asked. One of the places. The carriage slowed, then stopped in front of a stone mansion that made the governor's residence look modest. I prefer my northern estate, but this serves when business requires me in the capital. A footman opened the carriage door. Caleb stepped out first, then offered Clara his hand. The night air was cold enough to make her breath fog. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and followed him up the wide steps to the entrance, where another servant stood waiting. "Miss Whitmore will be staying in the east wing," Caleb said. "See that a fire is lit and anything she needs is provided." "Of course, sir." Inside, the house was all dark wood and expensive carpets, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor. Oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes mostly, harsh and beautiful. "You should rest," Caleb said. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." "What happens tomorrow?" "Cross will retaliate. Your mother will demand answers, and you'll have to decide what your next move is." He started up the stairs. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight you survived. That's enough." Clara watched him climb the stairs, this stranger who'd turned her entire life upside down in a single evening. "Caleb," he stopped, looked back. "Why did you really help me tonight?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, "Because watching someone drown when they could learn to swim isn't just wasteful, it's offensive." He disappeared down the upstairs hallway before she could respond. The servant, an older woman with kind eyes, led Clara to a bedroom that was twice the size of her room at home. A fire already crackled in the hearth. The bed was enormous, piled with blankets that looked soft enough to drown in. "Will you need help undressing, miss?" Clara looked down at her emerald gown, at the complicated lacing and buttons that had taken her maid an hour to fasten. "Yes, please." The woman worked in efficient silence, unlacing the corset that had been digging into Clara's ribs all night. When she finally stepped out of the dress, Clara could breathe properly for the first time in hours. "There's a nightgown in the wardrobe," the woman said, "and if you need anything during the night, just ring the bell." She left Clara alone with her thoughts and the crackling fire. Clara pulled on the nightgown, soft white cotton that smelled like lavender, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror across the room. She looked pale, exhausted, like someone who'd just survived a battle, which she supposed she had. She thought about crawling under those blankets and sleeping until tomorrow became next week, but her mind was racing too fast, replaying every moment of the evening, Nathaniel's voice in the study, Lila's tears on the terrace, the shocked silence when she'd broken the engagement, the way Caleb had looked at her when she'd made her choice. Clara stood and walked to the window. Below, the street was empty except for a single carriage making its way toward the commercial district. Beyond that, the territorial capital spread out in pools of light and shadow, full of people who would wake up tomorrow to the scandal of Clara Whitmore's very public downfall. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in." Caleb entered carrying a tray with a bottle and 2 glasses. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled up his shirt sleeves. It was the most informal she'd seen him. "Thought you might need this more than sleep," he said, setting the tray on the small table near the fireplace. "What is it?" "Whiskey. Good whiskey." He poured 2 glasses. "Helps with the part where your brain won't stop replaying everything." Clara accepted the glass and sat in one of the chairs by the fire. The whiskey burned going down but settled warm in her stomach. "Does it get easier?" she asked. "Making choices that everyone tells you are wrong?" "No." Caleb sat across from her. "But you get better at living with the consequences." "That's not particularly comforting." "Comfort's overrated." He swirled his glass. "You want the truth, or you want me to tell you everything's going to be fine?" "The truth. Tomorrow's going to be worse than you're imagining. Cross won't just let this go. He can't afford to. His entire reputation is built on being in control, on making calculated moves that always pay off. You just proved he miscalculated badly, and he's going to make sure you pay for that." Clara's grip tightened on her glass. "How?" "He'll spread rumors, say you were unstable, hysterical, that you imagined the affair or blew a harmless friendship out of proportion. He'll paint himself as the victim, the devoted fiancé betrayed by an irrational woman." Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. "By next week, half the territory will believe him." "And the other half?" "Will know the truth, but pretend they don't, because Cross has more power than you do." Clara drained her glass. "So I lose everything, and he walks away clean. That's what you're telling me." That's what would happen if you were alone. Caleb refilled her glass. But you're not alone. Not anymore. What does that mean? It means I'm making you an offer, a real one, not just charity or temporary shelter. Clara's heart started beating faster. What kind of offer? Caleb set down his glass and looked at her directly. Let me court you. The words hung in the air between them. Court me, Clara repeated slowly. You're not serious. I'm always serious about business, and make no mistake, this would be business, at least at first. Strategic, calculated, designed to accomplish specific goals. Which are, for you, protection, resources, a way to rebuild your reputation on your own terms instead of letting Cross destroy it. He leaned forward. For me, the satisfaction of watching Nathaniel Cross realize he lost something valuable because he was too arrogant to recognize what he had. Clara's mind was racing. You want to use me to humiliate him. I want to give you the tools to humiliate him yourself. Caleb's voice was sharp now. There's a difference. You'd be the one making the choices, the one controlling the narrative. I'd just be providing the backing. Why would you do that? Because I don't like men who treat women as disposable. Because Cross has been positioning himself as my rival for 3 years, and I'm tired of pretending I don't notice. Because, he stopped, seemed to reconsider. Because you impressed me tonight. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did. Clara studied him, trying to read past the careful control. And what would you expect in return? Your company, your trust, eventually. And if this goes where I think it could go, he paused. An actual partnership, not the kind Cross was offering, where you're just a useful accessory, a real alliance between equals. You don't know me well enough to know if we're equals. I know enough. His eyes didn't leave hers. I know you're smarter than you've been allowed to be. I know you're done playing by rules designed to keep you small. And I know that if you agree to this, if you let me stand beside you while you rebuild, Cross won't know what hit him. It was insane. Clara had broken her engagement 3 hours ago, and this man was already proposing, what? A fake courtship? A real one? She couldn't tell which would be worse. People will talk, she said. They're already talking. They'll say I left Nathaniel for you, that I was unfaithful first. Let them. Caleb's voice was hard. We'll know the truth. That's what matters. Is it? Clara heard the bitterness in her own voice. Because, in my experience, the truth matters a lot less than what people choose to believe. Then we make them believe something better. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the sleeping city. Tomorrow, I'll call on you, publicly. I'll make it clear that my interest is genuine, that I see value in you that Cross was too stupid to recognize. We'll attend events together. I'll introduce you to people who matter, people whose respect will shield you from the worst of the gossip. And in return, you give me your time, your honesty, and eventually, if this works, your respect. He turned back to face her. I'm not asking you to love me, Clara. I'm asking you to trust me long enough to see if this could become something real. Clara's head was spinning. From the whiskey or the offer, she couldn't tell. I need to think about it. Fair enough. Caleb moved toward the door. But don't think too long. Cross will move fast, and the best defense is a strong offense. He was almost to the door when Clara spoke again. What if I say no? What happens then? He paused, hand on the doorknob. Then I'll help you anyway. Find you somewhere safe to stay, connect you with people who can assist with your family's debts. But it won't be enough, not against what Cross is planning. His voice softened slightly. You broke his pride tonight, Clara. Men like him don't forgive that. He'll come after you with everything he has, and without backing, you won't survive it. So my choices are accept your offer or face destruction. Your choices are fight or surrender. Caleb opened the door. Everything else is just details. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Clara sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames, while her mind raced through possibilities and consequences and the growing certainty that she'd traded one complicated situation for another, but at least this one was her choice. She must have fallen asleep eventually because she woke to bright sunlight streaming through the windows and a knock at the door. The same servant from last night entered with a tray of tea and toast. Mr. Thornridge asked me to inform you that breakfast is at 9, if you wish to join him, and this arrived for you an hour ago. She held out a letter. Clara's stomach sank when she recognized her mother's handwriting on the envelope. Thank you, she managed. Alone again, Clara stared at the letter like it might bite her. Then she tore it open. The words were sharp, each one precisely chosen to wound. Clara, I cannot begin to express my disappointment in your behavior last night. You have brought shame upon our family, destroyed our last chance at security, and proven yourself to be exactly as selfish and short-sighted as your father feared you would become. Nathaniel Cross came to see me this morning. He was gracious enough to explain the truth of the situation, that you have been unstable for weeks, that he suspected you were forming an inappropriate attachment to Duke Thornridge, that your accusations against him were fabricated to justify your own infidelity. Clara's hands started shaking. He has offered in his generous way to overlook your behavior if you will apologize publicly and recommit to the engagement. I have accepted on your behalf. You will return home immediately, and you will make this right. If you refuse, you are no longer welcome in my house. Your sister's future will be destroyed because of your selfishness, and I will make certain everyone knows that you are the one to blame. You have until tomorrow at noon to decide. Mother. Clara read it twice, then a third time, waiting to feel something other than the cold fury spreading through her chest. Her mother had believed Nathaniel, had taken his version of events without question, without even asking Clara for her side of the story. Of course she had. Clara set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. Then she got dressed in the clothes that had been laid out for her, simple but well made, borrowed from somewhere, and went downstairs. She found Caleb in a dining room that could have seated 20, but currently held only him and enough food for a small army. "Good morning," he said without looking up from the newspaper he was reading. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup. Clara added cream and sugar with shaking hands. "Your mother wrote," she said. "I assumed she would. What did she say?" Clara handed him the letter. Caleb read it in silence, his expression never changing. Then he set it aside and took a sip of his coffee. "Well," he said, "that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Clara laughed without humor. She believed him. Everything he told her, every lie, she believed all of it. "Did you expect differently?" "I don't know. Maybe." Clara's voice cracked. "She's my mother. I thought that would count for something." "It should have." Caleb's voice was gentle now. "But people like your mother, they're survivors. They make whatever choice keeps them safest, even if that means sacrificing their children. That's a horrible thing to say." "It's a true thing to say." He pushed the letter back toward her. "So what are you going to do?" Clara looked at the letter, at her mother's neat handwriting spelling out ultimatums and accusations. At the deadline, tomorrow at noon, designed to pressure her into compliance. Then she looked at Caleb, who was watching her with patient curiosity, like he was genuinely interested in what she'd choose. "I'm going to burn it," Clara said. She picked up the letter, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it into the flames. They both watched it curl and blacken and disappear. "And?" Caleb prompted. Clara turned to face him. "And I accept your offer. Court me. Make a spectacle of it. Show Nathaniel Cross exactly what he lost and make sure everyone in this territory knows I'm not the one who should be ashamed." Caleb's smile was sharp and satisfied. "Good. Then we start today." "Today?" "Cross won't wait. Neither should we." He stood. "Get ready. We're going calling." 2 hours later, Clara found herself in Caleb's carriage again, this time heading back into the heart of the territorial capital. She wore a dress borrowed from somewhere, deep blue silk that fit well enough, expensive enough to make a statement. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The Continental Hotel, for lunch." Caleb straightened his cuffs. "It's where everyone who matters takes their midday meal, which means it's where we need to be seen." Clara's stomach twisted. "You want to parade me in front of society the day after I broke my engagement?" "I want to show them you're not hiding, that you have nothing to be ashamed of." He looked at her. "Unless you've changed your mind." She hadn't. But walking into that dining room, facing all those staring eyes and whispered judgments. "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "I know. Do it anyway." The Continental Hotel was exactly as intimidating as Clara remembered. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, waiters in crisp uniforms moving between tables filled with territorial power brokers and their perfectly dressed wives. Every head turned when they entered. Clara felt the weight of those stares like physical pressure. Felt people recognizing her, remembering last night, beginning to whisper. Caleb's hand settled at the small of her back, steady, grounding. "Breathe," he murmured, "and smile like you own the place." Clara lifted her chin and smiled. The maitre d' hurried over, his expression professionally blank. "Duke Thornridge, what a pleasure. Your usual table?" "Please." They were led to a corner table with a clear view of the entire dining room, which meant the entire dining room had a clear view of them. Caleb held Clara's chair, then sat across from her. A waiter appeared immediately with menus and water. "Everyone's staring," Clara said quietly. "Good. Let them look." Caleb opened his menu. "What they're seeing is you sitting here, composed and beautiful, clearly under my protection. That's the message." "And what about what Nathaniel told them? About me being unstable, inappropriate? Actions speak louder than rumors." He set down the menu. "You're here. You're calm. You're dining with one of the most powerful men in the territory. That tells a different story than whatever lies Cross is spreading." A woman approached their table, older, dripping in jewelry, her smile predatory. "Duke Thornridge, Miss Whitmore. What a surprise to see you both here." "Mrs. Ashford." Caleb stood, shook her hand. "How lovely to see you. I was just telling my husband about last night's excitement at the governor's gala." Her eyes fixed on Clara. "Such a dramatic scene. Are you quite well, dear?" There it was, the opening salvo dressed up as concern. Clara met her gaze steadily. "Perfectly well, thank you, though I appreciate your concern. It's just that one hears such troubling things. Broken engagements, public accusations. What you heard," Caleb interrupted smoothly, "was a young woman making a difficult but necessary choice. I admire that kind of courage." Mrs. Ashford's smile froze. "Ah, well, yes, of course," she glanced between them. "I wasn't aware you two were acquainted." "We are now." Caleb's voice was pleasant, final. "Please give my regards to your husband." She left, clearly desperate to report this conversation to someone. "That's the first of many," Caleb said, sitting back down. "Every busybody in the capital is going to try to get close enough to gather ammunition. Your job is to give them nothing. Just be calm and composed and act like everything's fine. Exactly. Even though my life is falling apart." "Your old life is falling apart," Caleb corrected. "That's different." They ordered lunch. Clara forced herself to eat even though her stomach was in knots. Around them, the dining room buzzed with barely concealed speculation. Then the doors opened and Nathaniel Cross walked in. Clara's fork clattered against her plate. Nathaniel saw them immediately. His expression flickered, surprise, anger, calculation, before smoothing into careful neutrality. He was with two other men, both influential territorial legislators. They headed for a table on the opposite side of the dining room, but Nathaniel's eyes stayed on Clara. "Don't look at him," Caleb said quietly. "He's right there." "I know. Don't look at him anyway. You're here with me. He's irrelevant." Clara forced her attention back to her plate, forced herself to take another bite, to chew, to swallow. Across the room, she could feel Nathaniel watching. "He's furious," she said. "He should be." Caleb sipped his wine. "You just proved he doesn't control you. Men like Cross can't stand that." "What do you think he'll do?" "Something stupid." Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. "He's angry and humiliated. That combination makes people reckless." As if on cue, Nathaniel stood and walked toward their table. Clara's heart started racing. "Miss Whitmore," Nathaniel said, his voice carefully pleasant. "What a surprise." "Mr. Cross." Clara was proud of how steady her voice sounded. His eyes flicked to Caleb. "Thornridge." "Cross." Caleb didn't stand, didn't offer his hand. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I was hoping to have a word with Clara, privately." "I'm afraid she's occupied," Caleb said. "I wasn't asking you." "Nevertheless." Caleb's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Nathaniel take a step back. "The lady is dining with me. Whatever you need to say can wait." "Can it?" Nathaniel looked at Clara. "Because I think we have quite a lot to discuss. The rumors you've been spreading, for instance. The lies you've been telling about—" "I haven't lied about anything," Clara interrupted. Her voice was louder than she intended. Several nearby tables went quiet. "Haven't you?" Nathaniel's smile was cruel now. "Because your mother seems to have a different understanding of events." as do most people who know the truth about your instability. Clara felt her face flush. My instability. It's nothing to be ashamed of, Nathaniel continued, his tone dripping false sympathy. Many women struggle with their nerves, with irrational jealousies, with, "That's enough." Caleb's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. He stood slowly, deliberately, until he was looking down at Nathaniel from his full height. "You will apologize to Miss Whitmore," Caleb said quietly, "and then you will leave." "This is none of your concern, Thornridge. You made it my concern when you walked over here and started spreading lies." Caleb's voice was still quiet, still controlled, but everyone in the dining room was listening now. "So I'll say it once more. Apologize and leave, or I'll make you regret ever stepping foot in this establishment." Nathaniel's face went white, then red. "You're threatening me? In public?" "I'm correcting you. There's a difference." Caleb didn't blink. "Clara Whitmore ended your engagement because you were unfaithful. Everyone with half a brain knows it. What you're doing now, trying to rewrite history, to paint yourself as the victim, it's beneath even you." The silence in the dining room was absolute. Nathaniel looked around, seemed to realize how many people were watching, how many influential witnesses were seeing this confrontation. "This isn't over," he said to Clara. "Yes," she heard herself say. "It is." Nathaniel turned and walked away, his back rigid, his humiliation visible in every line of his body. Clara realized she was shaking. Caleb sat back down like nothing had happened. "Where were we? Oh yes, you were telling me about your thoughts on the railroad expansion." We weren't." Clara stopped, looked around at all the watching faces. "Everyone's staring. They'll get over it." He cut into his steak. "In the meantime, you just saw what happens when Cross tries to intimidate you and fails. That's valuable information. He threatened me." "He tried to. There's a difference." Caleb met her eyes. "And now everyone in this room knows that if he comes after you, he goes through me first. That's the point of this entire exercise." Clara's hands were still shaking, but something else was rising in her chest. Something that felt like power, like possibility. She picked up her fork and took another bite. Around them, conversation slowly resumed, but Clara could feel it now, the shift in the room's energy, the recalculation happening at every table. She'd walked in here as the scandalous woman who'd broken her engagement. She was leaving as something else entirely. They finished lunch without further interruption. Caleb paid the bill, helped Clara with her wrap, and escorted her back to the carriage. Only when they were safely inside, the door closed, did Clara let out the breath she'd been holding. "That was necessary," Caleb finished. "Cross needed to see that you're not alone. That attacking you means attacking me." "And now what happens?" "Now he gets desperate." Caleb looked out the window. "And desperate men make mistakes." The carriage rolled through the afternoon streets. Clara watched the city pass by and tried to imagine what came next. How Nathaniel would retaliate. What her mother would do when the deadline passed. How she would rebuild a life from the wreckage of the old one. They were almost back to Caleb's house when the carriage suddenly lurched to a stop. Caleb's hand immediately went to the knife Clara hadn't known he carried. "Stay here." "What's happening?" He didn't answer, just opened the door and stepped out. Clara waited for exactly 3 seconds before following him. Outside, another carriage had pulled across the street, blocking their path. 3 men stood in front of it, rough-looking, the kind hired for work that required more muscle than morals. And standing behind them, his face twisted with rage, was Nathaniel Cross. "You think you can humiliate me?" Nathaniel's voice shook. "You think you can parade her around like some kind of prize, and I'll just accept it?" Caleb moved to stand between Clara and the men. "Go home, Cross. You're drunk, and you're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Nathaniel laughed wildly. "She's the one who destroyed our engagement in front of half the territory. She's the one who had every right to leave a man who was sleeping with her best friend," Caleb cut in. "Now move your carriage, or I'll move it for you." "You want her? Take her." Nathaniel's smile was vicious now. "But know what you're getting, a frigid, desperate woman who'll cling to any man stupid enough to show her attention. She's worthless, Thornridge. I was doing her a favor by—" Caleb moved so fast Clara almost missed it. One moment he was standing still. The next, Nathaniel was on the ground, his nose bleeding, his eyes wide with shock. The three hired men stepped forward. Caleb's knife appeared in his hand. Your choice, he said quietly. They looked at each other, looked at their employer bleeding in the street, looked at Caleb's absolute certainty. Then they backed away. Caleb turned to Nathaniel, who was struggling to his feet. If you come near her again, if you so much as speak her name, I will end you. Financially, socially, and if necessary, physically. Do you understand? Nathaniel wiped blood from his face, his expression murderous. This is war, he spat. No, Caleb said. This is you learning that there are consequences for treating people as disposable. He turned his back on Nathaniel, the ultimate dismissal, and held out his hand to Clara. Come on, let's go home. Clara took his hand and let him help her back into the carriage. As they pulled away, she looked back to see Nathaniel still standing in the street, his face a mask of hatred and humiliation. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was far from over. Clara's hands were still trembling when they reached Caleb's house. She kept seeing Nathaniel's face, the rage, the blood, the promise of violence in his eyes. She kept hearing his words. This is war. And the terrible part was that he meant it. Nathaniel Cross didn't make empty threats. Caleb helped her from the carriage, his hand steady on her elbow. Inside, he guided her to the library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books, a fire already burning in the hearth. Sit, he said. Clara sat. He poured her whiskey without asking, pressed the glass into her shaking hands. Drink. She drank. The burn helped center her, pulled her back from the edge of panic. He's going to destroy me, she said quietly. He's going to try. Caleb poured his own glass. There's a difference. You hit him. In front of witnesses. He'll use that. He'll say you're violent, dangerous, that I'm under your control somehow. Let him say it. Caleb's voice was calm. Everyone saw him block our carriage. Everyone heard what he called you. If he tries to spin this as my fault, he'll only make himself look weaker. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen Nathaniel operate, had watched him turn situations to his advantage with nothing but words and careful positioning. You don't know him like I do, she said. He doesn't lose. He won't accept this. Then we'll make him accept it. Caleb sat across from her. Clara, look at me. She did. You're afraid. That's reasonable. But fear only wins if you let it control you. And you didn't survive last night by being controlled by anything. Last night was impulse. This is sustained. He's going to come at me every day until I break. So don't break. He said it like it was simple. Every move he makes, we counter. Every lie he spreads, we expose. Every attempt to isolate you, we show the territory exactly how strong you actually are. And if that's not enough, then we escalate. Something dangerous flickered in Caleb's expression. Cross thinks he's the only one who knows how to play hardball. He's wrong. A knock at the door interrupted them. The same servant from before entered, looking worried. Sir, there's someone here to see Miss Whitmore. She says it's urgent. Who? Clara asked. A Miss Mercer, ma'am. Clara's stomach dropped. Lila's here? Should I send her away? Caleb asked. Clara stood, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to say yes, wanted nothing to do with the woman who'd betrayed her so completely. But another part, the part that needed to understand, needed to know what could possibly bring Lila here now. No, she said. I'll see her. Caleb's expression darkened. Clara, I know what I'm doing. Do you? She met his eyes. I need to hear what she has to say. Please. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be right outside if you need me. Lila was shown into the library looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back hastily, her dress wrinkled like she'd worn it all night. She stopped when she saw Clara, her face crumpling. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. Clara stayed where she was, maintaining distance. What do you want, Lila? To warn you. Lila's voice shook. Nathaniel, after what happened in the street, he's planning something worse than rumors or social destruction. Clara's chest tightened. What kind of something? I don't know exactly. He wouldn't tell me details. But he was with those men again, the ones from earlier, and he was talking about teaching you a lesson, about making sure you understood the cost of defying him. Lila stepped closer. Clara, I think he's going to hurt you. Why are you telling me this? Because, Lila's voice broke, because I've lost you. I've lost everything that mattered, but I can't. I can't stand by and let him hurt you, not after everything I've already done. Clara studied her former friend. The tears seemed genuine. The fear in her voice felt real, but trust, once shattered, didn't rebuild in a single conversation. You still love him, Claire said. It wasn't a question. Lila's silence was answer enough. Then why betray him now? Because loving someone doesn't make them good. Lila wiped her eyes roughly. I've been telling myself for months that what we were doing was justified. That you didn't really care about him anyway, that the marriage was just convenience, that somehow that made it acceptable. She laughed bitterly. But watching him today, the rage, the violence, the way he talked about you like you were nothing, I saw him clearly for the first time, and I was terrified. Of him? Of what I'd become by choosing him. Lila's hands twisted together. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent and something happened to you. Clara wanted to rage at her, to throw her warning back in her face and tell her to leave. But beneath the anger was something else, a recognition of the courage it had taken for Lila to come here, to turn against the man she loved. What exactly did he say? Clara asked. That you and Thornridge had embarrassed him too publicly to ignore. That he needed to make an example, to show the territory what happens to women who forget their place. Lila's voice dropped. He said something about your family's debts, about calling them in, making sure your mother and sister suffered for your choices. Ice flooded Clara's veins. He wouldn't. My mother has until tomorrow to. He doesn't care about the deadline anymore. He's past that. Lila stepped closer. Clara, he's unraveling. The man I thought I knew, the charming, controlled politician, he's gone. What's left is just rage and wounded pride. And you think warning me will somehow fix what you did? No. Lila's voice was steady now. Nothing will fix that. But maybe it'll keep you safe. That has to be worth something. Before Clara could respond, Caleb opened the door. We have a problem, he said. Both women turned to look at him. What kind of problem? Clara asked. The kind where Cross just called in every favor he has. Caleb's expression was grim. Your mother's creditors are demanding immediate payment, all of them, simultaneously. Clara felt the floor tilt beneath her. They can if Cross is backing the demands. And he is. Caleb held out a telegram. This just arrived. Your mother has 48 hours to settle her debts or face seizure of property. Clara read the telegram with shaking hands. The amount listed was staggering, more than 3 times what she'd thought her mother owed. She doesn't have this kind of money, Clara whispered. No one does. That's the point. Caleb's voice was hard. Cross isn't trying to collect. He's trying to destroy your family completely, to make sure you have nowhere to go, no one who'll take you in. Because I embarrassed him. Because you proved he doesn't own you. Caleb took the telegram back. But he miscalculated. How? He assumed your family's debts were your weakness, that threatening them would force you back under his control. Caleb's smile was sharp. He didn't account for me. Clara's head was spinning. What are you going to do? Pay the debts. All of them. What? No, that's... Clara tried to process what he was suggesting. That's tens of thousands of dollars. You can't just... I can. And I will. Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. Consider it an investment in watching Nathaniel Cross realize he's lost. Lila, forgotten in the corner, made a small sound. They both turned to look at her. He'll know it was you, Lila said to Caleb. The moment the debts are paid, he'll know you're the one who did it, and he'll... She stopped. He'll what? Caleb prompted. He'll come after you directly. Not through Clara. Not through reputation or rumors. He'll find something you actually care about and destroy it. Let him try. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. Caleb's voice was ice now. I've been watching Cross operate for 3 years. Watching him manipulate and scheme and treat people like chess pieces. I'm done watching. And if he wants to come after me directly, that actually makes this simpler. Clara found her voice. Caleb, you can't just pay my family's debts. It's too much. It makes me obligated to you in ways that... Do you trust me? He asked. The question hung between them. I don't know, Claire admitted. I barely know you. Fair enough. Caleb moved to his desk, pulled out paper and pen. Then here's what I'll do. I'll pay the debts as a loan to your mother. Proper paperwork, reasonable terms, nothing that puts you under any obligation to me personally. She can pay it back over time or not. I don't particularly care about the money. Then why do it? Because Cross is using your family as a weapon against you. I'm removing that weapon. He started writing. And because watching him realize he's powerless to hurt you through them will be immensely satisfying. Clara looked at Lila, who was watching this exchange with wide eyes. You're in love with him, Lila said quietly. What? Clara's head snapped around. Not Nathaniel. Thornridge. Lila's voice was sad. You don't see it yet, but I do. The way you look at him. The way you trust him, even though you just said you don't. That's absurd, Clara said, but her cheeks flushed. Caleb didn't look up from his writing. The lady's projecting. Ignore her. Am I? Lila asked. Or am I just seeing what you're both too stubborn to admit? You should leave, Clara said. You've delivered your warning. Thank you for that. But you and I, we're done, Lila. We'll never be what we were. Lila's face crumpled again, but she nodded. I know, Be careful, Clara. Both of you. Nathaniel's past the point where reason matters, and that makes him more dangerous than you think. She left without waiting for a response. In the silence that followed, Clara sank back into her chair. Do you believe her? Caleb asked. About Cross planning something violent? I don't know. Maybe. Clara rubbed her temples. She was right about the debts. Maybe she's right about the rest. Then we need to be ready. He finished writing and stood. I'll have my lawyer draw up the formal loan documents and get them to your mother's creditors by tomorrow morning. That handles the immediate threat, but we need to think long-term. Long-term, Claire repeated. You mean what happens after you've paid off my family's debts and publicly humiliated Nathaniel? What then? Then we rebuild your reputation properly, not just as the woman who left Cross, but as someone with value independent of any man. Caleb crossed to stand in front of her. You're smart, Clara, sharper than most of the idiots running this territory. We put that to use. How? I have investments, businesses, interests that span half the frontier. He leaned against the desk. You could manage some of them, not as a favor, as a genuine partner. Show the territory that you're more than just a society ornament. Clara stared at him. You want to make me a business partner? I want to give you options, tools, ways to build power that aren't dependent on who you're attached to. His voice was serious now. Cross thinks women are only valuable as accessories to powerful men. Prove him wrong. And if I fail, you won't. You can't know that. I've watched you handle the worst 3 days of your life with more grace and strength than most men show in their best moments. Caleb's eyes didn't leave hers. Trust me, you won't fail. Something in Clara's chest loosened. Not hope, exactly. Hope felt too fragile right now. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she could become something other than what everyone expected. All right, she said, show me. Over the next 2 days, Clara learned more about Caleb Thornridge's business empire than she'd known existed. He owned timber operations in the Northern Territories, shipping concerns along the coast, investments in 3 different railroad ventures. He had his fingers in banking, mining, real estate development, and he wanted her to help manage it. The timber operation is bleeding money, he said, spreading papers across his library table. The manager is either incompetent or stealing. I need someone to go up there, audit the books, and figure out which. Clara studied the numbers. How long have you suspected the problem? 6 months. Haven't had time to deal with it personally. And you think I can? I think you're motivated to prove yourself capable. That's worth more than experience. He pointed to a column of figures. What do you see there? Clara followed the numbers, her mind catching patterns. The timber yields are consistent, but the profit margins are shrinking. That suggests... She paused, calculating. Either costs are rising faster than revenue, or someone's skimming. Good. What would you do about it? Send someone I trust to verify the physical inventory against the reported numbers. Cross-reference worker wages with actual payouts. Look for discrepancies. Caleb smiled. See? You're already thinking like an auditor. I'm thinking like someone who's watched men lie about numbers my whole life. Clara set down the papers. That's different. No, it's better. He gathered the documents. Most of my managers have degrees and training, but they've never had to survive the way you have. They've never had to read between lines and catch lies hidden in polite conversation. That makes you more valuable, not less. Clara wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in anyway. The years of being told her only value was in connections and appearance, in making other people comfortable. What if I'm not ready for this? She asked quietly. Then you'll learn. Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. Same as everyone else. That afternoon, a messenger arrived with news that set the entire capital buzzing. Clara's mother's debts had been paid in full. Every creditor, every outstanding balance, settled before noon, and Nathaniel Cross's name was conspicuously absent from the transaction. Clara watched from Caleb's library window as carriages began arriving at his house. Curious society matrons, territorial businessmen, even the governor's aide, all wanting to know what this meant, what Caleb's interest in Clara Whitmore implied. Let them wonder, Caleb said when she mentioned it. Speculation works in our favor. Does it? When they're trying to figure out your value to me, they're not listening to Cross's lies about your instability. He pulled the curtain closed. By next week, you'll be the most talked about woman in the territory. That's leverage. He was right. Within 3 days, Clara received 17 calling cards from women who'd never spoken to her before. 5 dinner invitations. 3 requests for her opinion on various charitable endeavors. And 1 letter from her mother. Clara stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Clara, I have received notification that our family's debts have been settled by Duke Thornridge, with terms that are unexpectedly generous. I confess I do not fully understand what is happening or what arrangement you have made with him. I may have been too hasty in my judgment of the situation with Mr. Cross. Your sister has heard things, rumors that paint a different picture than the one he presented. Perhaps I should have listened more carefully before making assumptions. You are, of course, still welcome in this house, though I suspect you have found more suitable accommodations. Your sister wishes to see you, at your convenience. Mother. It wasn't an apology, wasn't even close, but it was as near as her mother would ever come to admitting she'd been wrong. Clara set the letter down and realized her hands were steady. What does she say? Caleb asked. That my sister wants to see me, and that maybe she was too quick to believe Nathaniel. Clara looked at him. She still doesn't understand what we're doing, what this is. Do you? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? You and me? This arrangement. Caleb leaned against the desk. Do you understand what it is? Clara's heart started beating faster. You said it was strategic, protection and resources in exchange for your company and trust. He moved closer. But it's become more than that, hasn't it? Has it? You tell me. His eyes didn't leave hers. Because the way you looked at me when I paid those debts, the way you're looking at me now, that's not strategy. Clara's breath caught. I can't. You can say it, Clara. It won't bite you. Say what? That you're starting to care. That this isn't just business anymore. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat of him. That maybe Lila was right. Lila was projecting her own. Clara. She stopped, met his eyes, saw something there that made her chest tight and her thoughts scatter. I don't know what this is, she admitted. I don't trust easily. Not anymore. And you're, what? Dangerous, unpredictable. You've turned my entire life upside down in less than a week. Is that a complaint? It's a fact. Clara's voice dropped. But it's also, I wouldn't go back, even if I could, even knowing what's coming. What do you think is coming? War. You said it yourself. Cross won't accept this. He'll escalate. Let him. Caleb's hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the calluses. Whatever he does, we'll handle it. Together. You keep saying that, together. Because I mean it. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're not alone anymore, Clara. You haven't been since you put your hand in mine at that gala. She should step back, should maintain distance, keep this professional and strategic like they'd agreed. Instead, she leaned into his touch. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. Probably. His smile was soft now, different from the sharp edges he showed the world. But when has that ever stopped you? The kiss, when it came, was inevitable, like gravity, like weather. Clara had kissed Nathaniel dozens of times, polite, appropriate touches that never went deeper than surface. This was nothing like that. This was heat and hunger and the feeling of coming alive after years of sleepwalking. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. That just complicated everything, Clara said. I know. People will say I left Nathaniel for you, that this was planned all along. Let them say it. It gives him ammunition. Or it shows him exactly what he lost. Caleb pulled back enough to look at her. I don't regret it. Do you? Clara thought about it. About all the ways this made her situation more complicated, more scandalous, more difficult to navigate. No, she said finally. I don't. Good. He kissed her forehead. Because I'm not done yet. Not done with what? Making sure everyone in this territory knows you're under my protection. And that includes cross-understanding he's outmatched. The next day, Caleb escorted Clara to the territorial assembly, the gathering of governors, legislators, and business leaders that shaped frontier policy. Women rarely attended. It simply wasn't done, which was exactly why Caleb insisted she come. They'll stare, Clara said as they climbed the steps to the assembly hall. Good. Let them see you're not hiding. Inside, the hall was packed with men in expensive suits, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile when Clara entered on Caleb's arm. Nathaniel was there, of course, standing with a group of railroad investors, his face carefully neutral when he saw them. Thornridge, the territorial governor said, approaching, didn't realize you were bringing a guest. Miss Whitmore has extensive knowledge of frontier economics, Caleb said smoothly. I thought she might provide valuable perspective. I see. The governor's eyes flicked to Clara, assessing. Well, any friend of yours is welcome, naturally. They found seats near the front. Around them, men whispered and stared. The assembly proceedings were exactly as boring as Clara had feared. Hours of debates about railroad routes, mining rights, territorial boundaries. But she listened carefully, tracking the arguments, noting which men held real power and which just pretended to. Then Nathaniel stood to speak. Gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the hall, I'd like to address a concern that's been brought to my attention regarding improper influence in territorial business matters. Clara's stomach tightened. Recently, Nathaniel continued, we've seen an example of how personal relationships can compromise professional judgment, how sentiment can override sound business practice. His eyes flicked toward Clara. I propose we establish clearer boundaries between personal affairs and territorial policy to prevent conflicts of interest. The implication was clear. He was talking about her, about Caleb's support, about how their relationship, whatever it was becoming, represented corruption rather than partnership. Several men nodded in agreement. Caleb stood. An interesting proposal, Cross, he said calmly, though I wonder if you're the right person to lecture others about mixing personal matters with business. The hall went quiet. I'm not sure I follow, Nathaniel said carefully. No? Then let me clarify. Caleb's voice was pleasant, dangerous. You're proposing rules about conflicts of interest while simultaneously using your political connections to call in debts against a woman who rejected you. That seems hypocritical. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathaniel's face flushed. That's a personal matter that has no bearing on territorial business? I disagree. Caleb pulled out a folder Clara hadn't known he was carrying. Because according to these documents, you used your position on the Banking Regulation Committee to pressure 3 different creditors into demanding immediate payment. That's not personal. That's abuse of power. He handed the folder to the governor. The hall erupted into conversation. Men stood, argued, demanded to see the documents. Clara watched Nathaniel's face go from red to white as the governor read through the papers. These are serious allegations, Cross, the governor said. They're lies. Fabrications designed to, They're signed affidavits from the creditors themselves, Caleb interrupted, stating that you threatened their business licenses if they didn't cooperate. Would you like to call them liars to their faces? Nathaniel looked around the hall, seemed to realize he was trapped. This is a setup, he said desperately. Thornridge has been planning this, using that woman to— That woman, Clara said, standing, has a name, and I'd appreciate you using it. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Her heart was racing, her palms sweating, but she kept her voice steady. Mr. Cross is correct about one thing, she continued. This is about mixing personal and professional matters, but not in the way he's suggesting. He's angry because I refused to marry him after discovering his infidelity. Everything since, the rumors, the debt manipulation, the attacks on my reputation, that's revenge, pure and simple. That's not— Nathaniel started. Prove it, Clara challenged. Prove you didn't use your political position to pressure my mother's creditors. Prove you haven't spent the last week trying to destroy me socially and financially. Prove any of the lies you've been spreading about my mental stability. Silence. I didn't think so, Clara said quietly. You're very good at manipulation, Mr. Cross, at making people believe what serves your interests. But you made a mistake. You assumed I'd be too afraid or too weak to fight back. You were wrong. She sat down. The hall stayed silent for 5 seconds. 10. Then someone started clapping. Clara looked up to see one of the older legislators, a man she'd never met, applauding. Then another joined. Then another. Not everyone. But enough. Enough to matter. The governor cleared his throat. I think we need to table Mr. Cross's proposal until these allegations can be properly investigated. In the meantime, he looked at Nathaniel. I'd suggest you focus on clearing your own name before questioning others' judgment. Nathaniel's face was murderous, but he nodded stiffly and sat down. The assembly moved on to other business. But Clara barely heard it. Her whole body was shaking with adrenaline, with the realization of what she'd just done. She'd stood up in a room full of powerful men and called out Nathaniel Cross publicly, had defended herself instead of staying quiet. And they'd listened. Not all of them, but enough. Caleb's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Outside, after the assembly ended, men approached them, not to gossip or judge, but to introduce themselves properly to Clara, to ask her opinion on matters they'd never have consulted a woman about before. She was becoming real to them. Not just a scandal or a pretty face, but someone with thoughts worth hearing. Across the hall, Nathaniel stood alone, his allies suddenly scarce. He caught Clara's eye, and the hatred there was absolute. But for the first time since this started, Clara wasn't afraid of it. She'd found her footing, found her voice. And she wasn't giving it up for anyone. The ride back to Caleb's house was quiet, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of fear anymore. Clara sat across from him in the carriage, watching the late afternoon sun paint the buildings gold, and felt something unfamiliar settling into her bones. Not peace exactly, but certainty. You're smiling, Caleb observed. Clara touched her face, surprised to find he was right. I didn't realize. You stood in front of the territorial assembly and dismantled Nathaniel Cross in 3 sentences. I'd be smiling too. I was terrified. I know, you did it anyway. He leaned back against the seat. That's what courage actually looks like. Not the absence of fear, the willingness to act despite it. Clara thought about that. About the way her voice had shaken when she'd first stood up, the way her hands had trembled holding the edge of the desk. But she'd done it. Had spoken when everything in her training said to stay quiet and let men handle men's business. Nathaniel's face, she said softly, when the governor sided with us. I've never seen him look like that. Powerless. That's what you saw. Caleb's voice was satisfied. He spent years believing he could control any situation through manipulation and political pressure. You just proved he can't control you. He'll retaliate. Probably, but from a weaker position than before. Caleb studied her. How does it feel? Knowing you won? I'm not sure I did win. Not yet. Clara looked out the window. He's wounded, not beaten, and wounded animals are the most dangerous. Smart. Caleb nodded approval. Don't get overconfident, but don't undersell what you accomplished today either. You changed how those men see you, from scandal to force. That matters. The carriage pulled up to the house. Inside, a fire was already lit in the library, and Clara found herself gravitating there like it had become her space. Caleb poured them both wine, something rich and dark that tasted like cherries and smoke. To victories, he said, raising his glass. However incomplete, Clara touched her glass to his. To not being destroyed. Set your sights higher than that. Should I? You just spoke truth to power in a room full of men who'd prefer you silent. Caleb's eyes were intense. Yes, set your sights higher. Before Clara could respond, rapid footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door burst open and Caleb's house manager entered, looking alarmed. Sir, you should come outside. Now. They followed him to the front entrance. Through the windows, Clara could see a crowd gathering in the street. At least 30 people, maybe more, holding torches against the falling darkness. Her stomach dropped. What is this? Caleb's expression went hard. Cross making his move. Stay inside. Like hell. Clara was already moving toward the door. Clara, no. She turned to face him. If this is about me, hiding won't help. They stepped outside together. The crowd went quiet when they appeared. Nathaniel stood at the front, his face illuminated by torchlight. Behind him were the same rough men from the street confrontation, plus a dozen others Clara didn't recognize. Thornridge, Nathaniel called out. We need to talk. About what? Caleb's voice was calm, but Clara could feel the tension in his body. About you harboring a woman who's been spreading lies about prominent members of this community. Nathaniel's voice carried across the street. About you using your wealth and position to interfere in matters that don't concern you. Everything concerning Clara Whitmore concerns me now, Caleb said. So if you have accusations, make them directly. Fine. Nathaniel stepped closer to the property line. You've been manipulating territorial business through her, using her connection to her mother's creditors to gain leverage in banking regulation. It's corruption disguised as charity. Several people in the crowd murmured agreement. Clara felt Caleb tense beside her, preparing to respond. But something in her snapped. That's a lie, she said loudly. The crowd shifted, surprised to hear her speak. Of course you deny it, Nathaniel shot back. You've been lying since this started. About our relationship, about what happened between us, about... I caught you with Lila Mercer, Clara interrupted, in the governor's study. I heard you call me biddable and useful and nothing more than a means to an end. Those aren't lies, Nathaniel. Those are facts. Says the woman who's been sleeping with Thornridge since before our engagement ended. I wasn't. Clara's voice cut through his. I met Duke Thornridge the night of the gala, the same night I discovered your betrayal. Everything since has been about surviving what you tried to do to me. What I tried? Nathaniel's laugh was ugly. You destroyed our engagement publicly. You humiliated me in front of the entire territory, and now you stand there claiming to be the victim? Yes. Clara stepped forward, moving past Caleb's protective stance. Because you made me one. Not by ending our relationship. I'm grateful for that now. But by trying to destroy me when I refused to quietly accept your cruelty. She looked at the crowd, made eye contact with as many people as she could. Most of you know me. You've known my family for years. You've watched me grow up in this territory. Her voice was steady now. Ask yourselves, does the woman you know match the hysterical, unstable creature Mr. Cross has been describing? Or does his version of events serve his interests more than truth? Silence. Then a woman stepped forward from the crowd, older, well-dressed, someone Clara recognized from various society functions. I was at the gala, she said. I saw Cross with Lila Mercer, the way they looked at each other. That wasn't friendship. Another voice. My husband serves on the banking committee. Cross did pressure him about the Whitmore debts. We thought it was strange at the time. More people speaking up now, confirming pieces of Clara's story, questioning Nathaniel's narrative. Nathaniel's face was getting redder. These people have been bought. By what? Clara challenged. I have no money, no power of my own. What could I possibly offer them to lie on my behalf? Thornridge has money. Thornridge has power. And you have neither anymore, Caleb said quietly. The words dropped like stones into water. Nathaniel wheeled on him. What? Your seat on the banking committee. The governor asked for your resignation this afternoon. Your investors in the railroad venture pulled out after hearing about the debt manipulation. Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. You've spent the last week trying to destroy Clara. You destroyed yourself instead. You did this. Nathaniel's control was fracturing visibly now. You turned them against me. No. You did that yourself when you used your position for personal revenge. Caleb moved to stand beside Clara. I just made sure people knew about it." Nathaniel looked around at the crowd, seemed to realize they weren't with him anymore. The mob he'd assembled to intimidate was dissolving, people drifting back, uncomfortable with what this had become. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Yes, it is." Clara's voice was soft but absolute. "You've lost, Nathaniel, not because of Duke Thornridge's intervention, not because of my lies, but because you overplayed your hand. You were so certain you could control me through fear and social pressure that you never considered I might fight back. You'll regret this," Nathaniel said desperately. "When everyone sees you for what you really are, what am I really?" Clara stepped closer to him, close enough to see the rage and humiliation and genuine confusion in his eyes. "I'm a woman who refused to be disposable, who chose dignity over security, who learned that sometimes the only way forward is to burn down what's behind you." She paused. "If that makes me dangerous in your eyes, good. Maybe more women should be." She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked back toward the house. Behind her, she heard the crowd breaking up, heard Caleb's quiet voice telling people to go home, heard Nathaniel's footsteps retreating down the street. Inside, Clara's legs finally gave out. She sank into the nearest chair and pressed her hands to her face. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," Caleb said, closing the door. "Which do you think it was?" "Both." He knelt in front of her chair. "Clara, look at me." She lowered her hands. "You just faced down a mob," he said. "You spoke truth in front of 36 witnesses when you could have stayed silent, and you did it without any guarantee that it would work. It almost didn't work. But it did. Because people aren't as stupid as Cross thinks they are. They can recognize truth when they hear it." He took her hands. "You won." "For now," Clara said. "Until he finds another angle, another way to—" "He won't." Caleb's voice was certain. "I've been watching him since you spoke. He's broken. His reputation is shattered, his political connections are withdrawing, and he's lost the one thing he valued most, control over the narrative." "So what happens to him?" "He'll leave. Probably go back east, try to rebuild somewhere people haven't heard about his humiliation here." Caleb squeezed her hands. "But that's not your concern anymore. You're done with Nathaniel Cross." Clara wanted to believe that, but years of fear and careful calculation weren't erased in a single confrontation. "What if I'm not?" she whispered. "Done with him? What if I never stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to strike back? Then I'll be there too, looking over your shoulder, waiting with you." Caleb's eyes were steady. "You're not alone in this, Clara. You haven't been for days now." "I know, but—" She stopped, struggling with words. "What if I'm not strong enough to sustain this? What if without the immediate threat, without the crisis forcing me forward, I just collapse?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because strength isn't about never collapsing. It's about getting back up." He pulled her to her feet. "And you've proven you can do that, repeatedly." A knock at the door interrupted them. Caleb's house manager again, looking apologetic. "Sir, there's a Miss Whitmore here to see Clara, her sister." Clara's heart jumped. "Emma's here? Should I—" "Yes. Please, send her in." Emma Whitmore burst through the door moments later and threw herself at Clara, wrapping her in a fierce hug. "You're all right," Emma breathed. "I heard about the crowd, about Cross coming here, and I was so worried." "I'm fine." Clara hugged her sister back, feeling tension she hadn't known she was carrying finally ease. "I'm all right." Emma pulled back, studying Clara's face. At 17, she looked so much like their father. Same sharp eyes, same stubborn chin. "Mother wouldn't let me come earlier," Emma said. "She was afraid it would make things worse, associating with you while the scandal was fresh. But I don't care anymore. You're my sister." "Emma—" "No, let me finish." Emma's voice shook. "I believed Cross at first. When he came to the house, when he told Mother you'd gone mad with jealousy, I thought I was stupid enough to think he might be telling the truth. But then I heard what he said about you at the assembly, how he tried to manipulate your creditors, and I realized he'd been lying all along." Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. "You didn't have to come." "Yes, I did." Emma gripped Clara's hands. "Because you stood up to him. You fought back when everyone expected you to crumble. And if you can do that, If you can face down the most powerful man who ever proposed to you, then I can face Mother's anger about me coming here. What did Mother say when you left? That I was throwing away my prospects, that no decent family would want to associate with the Whitmores after all this scandal. Emma's smile was fierce. I told her I didn't care, that I'd rather have no prospects than become like her, choosing security over truth every single time. Clara pulled her sister into another hug, this one tighter. You're braver than I was at 17. I'm braver because you showed me how. Emma's voice was muffled against Clara's shoulder. You're the one who walked away first. They sat together by the fire while Emma caught Clara up on everything happening at home, how their mother was still in denial about Cross's true nature, how the creditor payments had saved their house, how society was slowly beginning to question the narrative they'd been fed. Caleb excused himself to give them privacy, and Clara found herself grateful for that, for a man who understood when to step back, when to give her space to reconnect with family. Do you love him? Emma asked when they were alone. Duke Thornridge? Clara thought about lying, deflecting, but Emma deserved better. I think I might, she admitted. It's too soon to be certain. And there's so much complication. The way we met, the scandal, people thinking I left Nathaniel for him. Did you? No, I left Nathaniel because he was unfaithful and cruel. Clara met her sister's eyes. But I chose Caleb because he saw me as more than just a useful connection, because he believed I could be strong when I didn't believe it myself. That's not a bad foundation, Emma said. Better than most marriages I've seen. We're not married. Not yet. Emma's smile was knowing. But you will be. The way he looks at you, that's not strategy. That's something real. Clara wanted to argue, but she thought about the kiss in the library, about Caleb's steady presence through every crisis, about the way he'd stood beside her tonight without trying to speak for her. Maybe Emma was right. The next morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the realization that for the first time in a week, she wasn't afraid. She dressed in clothes that were finally her own. Emma had brought a trunk from their mother's house and went downstairs to find Caleb already at breakfast, reading through a stack of correspondence. Morning, he said without looking up. Coffee's fresh. Clara poured herself a cup and sat across from him. What's all that? Responses to yesterday's assembly. He set down a letter. 3 territorial governors expressing support for our position, 4 business partners offering new investment opportunities, and 1 very interesting proposal from the Territorial Banking Association. Interesting how? They want your input on reforming debt collection practices. Caleb's smile was amused. Apparently your public confrontation with Cross highlighted some serious flaws in how creditors can be weaponized. They think a woman's perspective might be valuable in addressing it. Clara stared at him. They want my help. The same people who were ready to shun me a week ago. Power shifts quickly when you prove yourself capable. He handed her the letter. You don't have to accept, but it's an opportunity to influence policy, to make sure what Cross did to you can't happen to others. Clara read the letter carefully. The language was formal, respectful, nothing like the dismissive tone she'd expected. I want to accept, she said slowly, but I don't know enough about banking regulation to, so learn. Caleb pushed a different stack of papers toward her. These are reports on current territorial debt practices. Read them. Form opinions. Then tell the Banking Association what needs to change. Just like that? Just like that. He refilled his coffee. You're not the powerless woman who walked into the governor's gala anymore, Clara. The sooner you accept that, the more effective you'll be. Over the next few weeks, Clara discovered exactly how true that was. The Banking Association adopted 2 of her suggested reforms. A women's business consortium invited her to speak at their quarterly meeting, and slowly, carefully, she began building something entirely her own, not defined by Caleb's protection or Nathaniel's rejection, but by her own capabilities. She also began managing some of Caleb's northern timber operations. The account books had been a disaster, exactly as he'd suspected, and Clara spent days untangling the mess, cross-referencing invoices, identifying discrepancies. When she finally had proof that the manager had been embezzling for over a year, Caleb didn't just fire him. He had Clara present the evidence to the Territorial Commercial Court herself. You did the work, Caleb said when she protested. You take the credit. So Clara stood in front of a panel of judges and explained, in methodical detail, exactly how the theft had been accomplished and concealed. Afterward, the presiding judge asked if she'd be interested in consulting on other commercial fraud cases. She said yes. A month after the assembly confrontation, Clara finally returned to her mother's house. She found it smaller than she remembered, or maybe she'd just grown larger, less willing to make herself fit into spaces designed to contain her. Her mother was in the sitting room doing needlework with mechanical precision. "Clara," she said when Clara entered, "you look well." "I am well." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then her mother set down her needlework. "I was wrong," she said abruptly. "About Mr. Cross. About your engagement. About—" She stopped, struggling. "About believing his version of events over yours." It wasn't a full apology. Probably never would be, but it was more than Clara had expected. "Thank you for saying that," Clara said quietly. "Your sister speaks very highly of Duke Thornridge." Her mother's voice was carefully neutral. "She seems to think the two of you are quite serious." "We are." "And his intentions?" Clara thought about the question, about what it really meant, whether Caleb planned to marry her, whether this arrangement would become permanent. "His intentions are to treat me as an equal partner in both business and life," Clara said. "That's more than I ever expected from Nathaniel." Her mother's expression flickered, something that might have been regret or recognition. "Perhaps I taught you to expect too little." "Perhaps. But you learned to expect more anyway." Her mother picked up her needlework again. "I suppose that's worth something." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. That evening, Clara and Caleb attended the territorial governor's annual winter ball, the same venue where everything had started, but utterly transformed by context. This time, when Clara entered on Caleb's arm, people didn't whisper about scandal. They nodded in respect. Women who'd previously shunned her approached to discuss business opportunities. Men who'd dismissed her sought her opinion on commercial matters. And Nathaniel Cross was nowhere to be seen. "I heard he left for Philadelphia," someone mentioned in passing, "going to try his luck in banking back east." Clara felt nothing at the news. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. They danced, properly this time, without the weight of impending crisis. Just two people moving together to music, comfortable in each other's space. "You're quiet," Caleb observed. "I'm thinking." "About?" "About how different this is from last time. How much has changed in 6 weeks. Do you regret any of it?" Clara considered the question seriously. The pain, the fear, the night spent wondering if she'd destroyed everything for nothing. "No," she said finally. "I regret what Nathaniel did, what Lila did. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret choosing to fight. And I don't regret you." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "Good. Because I have something to ask you." Clara's heart started beating faster. "What?" He guided her off the dance floor, out to the same terrace where he'd first offered her a lifeline. The night air was cold but clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. "I told you this started as strategy," Caleb said. "Protection and resources in exchange for your company, a way to rebuild your reputation while undermining Cross. I remember. It's not strategy anymore." He turned to face her fully. "Somewhere between that first dance and watching you dismantle Cross in front of the assembly, this became real for me. You became—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words in a way Clara had never seen from him. "You became the most important thing." Clara's breath caught. "Caleb, let me finish." He took her hands. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. You've spent too long being pressured into commitments you weren't ready for. But I'm asking for your permission to court you properly. Not for show, not for strategy. Because I want a future with you in it, as my partner, my equal, and eventually, if you'll have me, my wife." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "That's the second best proposal I've ever heard." "Second best? The best one will be when you actually ask me to marry you." She smiled through the tears. "But this is a close second." Caleb laughed, genuine, unguarded, and pulled her into a kiss that felt like promise and possibility and choosing each other over and over again. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she said softly. "Court me properly. Build a future with me. And when you're ready to ask the real question, I'll say yes to that too. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. They stood together under the stars while music drifted out from the ballroom, while the territorial elite danced and schemed and played their careful games inside. But out here, it was just the two of them. Just Clara Whitmore, who'd walked into a gala 6 weeks ago expecting to celebrate her engagement and had walked out having destroyed it instead. Who'd chosen dignity over security, truth over convenience, her own strength over someone else's control. Just Caleb Thornridge, who'd seen that strength before she recognized it herself, who'd offered protection without demanding submission, who'd stood beside her through every battle without trying to fight them for her. Just two people who'd found each other in crisis and decided to build something real from the wreckage. We should go back inside, Clara said eventually. People will talk. Let them talk. Caleb's smile was soft. We've given them plenty to discuss already. True. Clara took his hand. But this time, let's give them something good to say. They walked back into the ballroom together, not as scandal, not as strategy, but as partners, as equals, as two people who'd learned that sometimes the only way to find yourself is to lose everything you thought defined you. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Couples swirled across the floor in careful formations, following rules that had been set long before any of them were born. But Clara had learned something in these past weeks, that rules were only as powerful as your willingness to follow them. That strength came from choosing yourself even when the cost seemed impossible. That sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply refusing to be what others expected. She'd walked into this ballroom 6 weeks ago as Clara Whitmore, dutiful daughter, suitable fiancé, carefully constructed to fit someone else's requirements. She was leaving it as someone entirely new. Someone forged in crisis and humiliation and the desperate need to prove she was more than disposable. Someone powerful, someone free. And as Caleb swept her back onto the dance floor as the music rose and the chandeliers blazed overhead, Clara realized something fundamental had shifted. Not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She wasn't the woman who'd been betrayed anymore. She was the woman who'd survived it, who'd fought back, who'd refused to be destroyed. And that woman, scarred, imperfect, still learning her own strength, was exactly who she'd been meant to become. The music played on. The night stretched ahead, full of possibility. And Clara Whitmore danced.